Hey everybody, Fishman here. Welcome to another video. Before we get into today's build of the acrylic sieve just using hand tools, I wanted to show you a new technique I've been working on. I first ran across this on a really lovely channel. It's Ohio 56. I'll leave a link below. It's a woodworking channel, and the gentleman is actually a really lovely craftsman. He makes great videos and lots of interesting projects. And in this particular case, the technique I saw was he was making a round disc. He was replacing the disc on his sander, and this is how he made a round disc. He didn't have a lathe or anything, but he does have, table saws and that sort of stuff. And he made a really interesting round disc, and I was wondering if it was applicable to acrylic. So what I've done here is I've took well, basically it was an offcut of acrylic. I had damaged one side of it, so it wasn't any good for my projects, but it already had a 1-inch hole in it. It was already, of course, the right size. So I drilled a 1-inch hole in a piece of plywood, stuck in a piece of 1-inch tube, and then just, as you can see here, I'm just rotating it gradually as I am cutting off all the corners. And as you can see, it starts off as octagon and works its way down through very numerous polygons. And at the very end here, what I'm going to do here is, now that we're getting right down to the very end of it, I am just going to edge it up by the saw blade, and then just rotate the disc. Now this is not going to be lathe quality, but it's something I could use because this only takes a few minutes. I can use this to get a disc, roughly the size and shape I want, and it'll be ready to go on the lathe, and I just have to turn it down to precise dimensions that way. Now if you don't have a lathe, this is a great technique for putting a round bottom on something, as long as it's not internalized. It's not good enough, I don't think, for friction fit. I'm going to work on it a little bit more. Maybe I can get it to that level, but it's much easier, obviously, to do on a lathe. Now this finish here is actually something that really surprised me. This is really good. I mean, it's obviously saw blade quality. It's not the same as a lathe, but that is really good. You can't tell that that was cut by reducing polygons to eventually getting a circle. I really like that technique, and thank you very much for showing that to me, and it's something I wanted to pass on to you guys. Before we get into this is, well, I always use power tools when I'm working with acrylic because it's much faster, and it actually gives you much more repeatable results. But a lot of people haven't the tools, so what I'm going to do here is bake something very simple. So first off, we have to make a miter box, because you have to be able to cut square cuts, and this is the only way of doing it. It's really simple. It's just 3 pieces of plywood screwed together. I'm not doing anything fancy for it at all. The only little bit of a cheat I'm going to do here for this is, once I have this screwed all together, you can see that there's a nick on the top here. What I did is I put it on the saw sled, and I just did a slight pass over just both ends, just so I had the start. So my saw blade was initially going to be straight, like 90 degrees. And that's the only thing I did. Now to keep the saw blade, the miter saw blade here, at 90, so I have a little piece of plywood there. I cut that to 90 degrees, and I put that right up against the blade so that it would stay at 90 for the first bit, and then after it gets down into the groove here, as you see it's going here now, it just stays 90. It's easy because it's self-guiding at this point, and that's the nice thing about miter saws. So all I'm going to do is going to bring this down to the bottom, and you'll notice that it's really tight, and that is good in certain circumstances when you're cutting wood. But for acrylic, it is a bit of a pain because you can't have any kind of hesitation when you're cutting acrylic. So this first one here, this first test cut I'm doing, I am just doing it straight off of the miter cut. I'm getting a little bit of drag from it, so it's not cutting as smoothly as I like. But I want to do a test cut before I did anything else, and I find that that's the saw blade cut from the table saw. You can see the marks, and you can see here, you can see where it has melted it, and at the very end it just broke off a bit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to widen that gap just a little bit, and then do it again so I don't have any drag from the miter box, and then it comes out much better. And first off, I'd like to tell you guys, this is a workout. I do a fair amount of hand tool work, and I do a lot of work of lifting buckets and whatnot, but cutting all the pieces for this tiny little sieve all by hand, yeah, I love my table saw now. it is much simpler to do it this way, and obviously much faster. So one cut, and it took me not long really, maybe 40 seconds per cut. And these are actually relatively small pieces too, so it's there's a saw blade cut, and you can see marks and stuff. And this is now the miter box cut by hand tools. It is good enough. It is square. It is a bit of melting on there, but the methylene chloride will dissolve that, so it is, like I said, good enough. Now, when I made the nesting sieves for the sink, I had cut the discs, the ones that fit up inside the tubes, so that they were friction fit, and then they would hold whatever material I wanted to use for the sieve part in place simply because of that merit of friction. Now, what I want to do here is something similar. So to get that kind of precision, I am going to go a slightly different route for this. What I could have done is I could have cut 4 narrow rectangles and then weld them together into a square disc. But it would be very difficult to get that to be flat and true, and again, because, like I said, they're being cut by hand, there might be enough of a variation that I couldn't get them to fit as well as I would want them to. But even still, even this way, even with cutting one disc and then drilling a whole pile of holes and then using a saw to remove the disc in the center and all the filing and sanding down, it's still not going to be precise enough, I think, for a full friction fit for both of them. So what I'm going to do is I am going to weld one of them into place and then build the remaining of the box around that. And then what I can do is use the final disc and do a friction fit for that one. And then hopefully that will be enough for that to fit together properly. This will still allow one of the discs to be removed, and therefore the screening that I'm using as a sieve, and allow for cleaning and that sort of stuff. So it's a bit of a compromise, I suppose, but I think it's about the best I can expect when I'm cutting all these by hand tools. Now, I should have obviously used a handheld drill for this, but that's not much of a cheat in this particular case. And I was trying to save a bit of time at this point because cutting all of those pieces of acrylic by hand took a fair amount of time, and I was trying to get this done. So this is this saw here. I should be using a coping saw, but I don't own one. But this little hacksaw here, it will do the job. All you need is something that you can take the blade out, of course, and then feed it through one of the holes, so it has to fit through a hole. And then it's just a simple matter of cutting down on the inside, or sorry, on the outside there, along here. I see in a second here. There, down all those little nubs and get rid of those as much as you can anyway. Obviously you can't get rid of them all because it's a small blade. Even if it's a small sharp blade, it just won't get down nice and straight there. So once this disc comes out of the middle, then it's a long, laborious process of filing down the nubs as much as I can with a rough file, and then sanding those down as much as I can as well after that. It took a while, and like I said, this is an interesting exercise. It kind of reminds me actually of the days I used to do a lot of camping. This may sound like a weird analogy, but one of the interesting things I found about going camping is you really enjoyed your bed when you got home. And this is kind of a similar sort of thing. It makes me really appreciate my power tools, I tell you, because it makes the job so much simpler and I can get so much more work done with them. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to finish this off, and then I'm going to show you some of the filing. I'm not going to show it all to you because it went on forever, and this is already going to be a long video. But after that, I am going to show you how easy this is to do with the milling machine, simply because I didn't want to do 2 of these. Showing a proof of concept was fine, and getting it to that point, and I was quite happy to do that. But to try and cut 2 of these out, and again, I said the day was getting kind of long already, and I had a bunch of other stuff I needed to do, so I wanted to get this finished. So I didn't want to do two of these, and also it's an interesting comparison because when I do that up, when I do the cheat part with a milling machine, I'm not doing any measuring. I'm just eyeballing it and getting as close as I can because, like I said, I'm trying to get this done and get it done in timely fashion. So still, though, it's like night and day comparison for how accurate you can be, even though I'm not even trying to be accurate with it. So this is going to take quite a while. I'm just going to show you a little bit of it. I went through with this file, and then I used some sandpaper and went through all that. So, like I said, I'm not going to show you all that. I will show you the end result in a minute. And this is how easy it is to do with the milling machine. Just run it through. There's no sanding. There's no filing. There's no drilling. Nothing. Just run the bit through and cut your square out and you're done. So anyway, I'm not going to show you the rest of that either. So this is the one I did by hand. Yeah, it turned out pretty good. Again, for a first effort, I suppose. And this is the one I wasn't even trying at on the milling machine. No finishing, no nothing. And of course it's square and the right size. But okay, you know. Like I said, this is not just me showing you how you can do things with hand tools. It is an interesting comparison between that and, like I said, what you can get. I held these up. This is the other option I had. These are just like you cut 4 of those and then you weld them together. It would have ended up with a nicer finish on the inside, but then again, I would have difficulty making this a nice friction fit on the inside. So interesting compromise. You could have done it either way though, and of course if I had done it that way, I wouldn't have the issue of that kind of ragged looking, not quite square hole in the middle there. But that's okay. Either way is fine. So I'm going to do a quick weld up here. I am obviously using the nicer one. That is because if I end up deciding to use this or keep it around, I will probably just recut the top one just to fit more properly, or not bother at all. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. And here you can see where I was a little off on my cutting. That is not where it should be, that seam. You can see a little overhang there. In the case, when I'm using power tools, it's not such a big deal. It's just a matter of just putting it through the table saw and nipping off that little extra. But I'm going to leave it on for now. Like I said, this is just showing you how you can do that. And as you can see, it is doable. It is a workout, I'll tell you that, but it is doable. So thank you very much for watching. If you like this style of video, please like and or subscribe, and definitely let me know what you think of the hand tool version of this process. It turned out okay. It's a box. It's going to hold the sieve in place. I'm going to put the screen here in a second. And I got enough of a friction fit on that it's good enough. But again, it's not up to lathe quality or milling machine quality. It's just, it works. That's good enough. So there you go. Put the screen in. I'm not going to bother putting this one in the sink and running it. It will run perfectly fine. All that matters is that this fits down snugly, and it does. There you go. And that's it. Just squeeze it into place, and that is it can be popped out and cleaned, and just like the other ones. So a few rough edges, but that's it. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and bye for now.